Most people experienced the Kevin Hart roast from a distance. They were scrolling through clips on their phones, watching reactions on TV, and building opinions about what happened, what should have happened, and who deserved the blame. But Cam Patterson wasn't looking at this situation from the outside. He's a 27-year-old comedian who recently worked alongside Kevin Hart on a Netflix project. Came up through Kill Tony and the Austin comedy scene with Tony Hinchcliffe, and knows both of these men as actual people, not headlines, not trending topics, and not characters in an online debate. These are individuals he has shared stages with, learned valuable lessons from, and built key parts of his career around. So when he sat down with Shannon Sharpe and was asked about the roast, what followed wasn't some carefully crafted viral soundbite. Instead, it was the thoughtful and complicated perspective of someone who found himself caught between two worlds crashing into each other in real time. And trust me, what he revealed about the George Floyd joke and why it landed differently, even for him, is something that deserves a closer look.
Barbershop Cuts and Cocktails for hosting us today in Las Vegas, hidden behind a working barbershop in the Cosmopolitan. This speakeasy brings live music, great cocktails, and one of the best nights on the show.
Before we break down what Cam actually had to say about the roast, you need to understand why his perspective carries far more weight than the average commentator firing off opinions online. Cam Patterson is just 27 years old. He was born and raised in Orlando, Florida. He's only been doing stand-up comedy for 5 years. Yet in that short time, he went from working the door at the comedy mothership in Austin, taking out trash, checking IDs, and doing whatever was needed, to performing on one of the biggest stages in the world, alongside Kevin Hart at Madison Square Garden. He also made an appearance on SNL. Then came a role in Kevin Hart's Netflix film, 72 Hours. What's important here is that every step of that journey happened inside the same comedy world that's now at the center of this entire controversy. Cam built his name through Kill Tony. He spent years in Austin's comedy scene. He knows Tony Hinchcliffe personally. He's traveled with him, shared stages with him, and watched firsthand as Tony turned Kill Tony into one of the most successful comedy platforms on the planet. So when social media exploded with accusations and demands for accountability aimed at Tony, Cam wasn't observing from a distance like everyone else. He was watching someone he actually knows get pulled into the storm. At the same time, Kevin Hart isn't just another celebrity in Cam's story either. Hart is directly connected to the opportunity that gave Cam his first major film role. Cam auditioned for 72 Hours, walked into a room filled with seasoned actors who seemed far more qualified, nearly convinced himself he had no shot, and then got the call saying he landed the role. Kevin Hart was the person who opened that door. That's why when Cam Patterson sat down across from Shannon Sharpe and was asked about the roast, he wasn't speaking as someone with no personal investment. He had ties to nearly every side of the conversation, and that's exactly what makes his comments impossible to ignore.
Las Vegas, hidden behind a working barbershop in the Cosmopolitan. This speakeasy brings live music, great cocktails, and one of the best nights on the Strip. Now, let's get to today's episode. Hello, welcome to another episode of Club Shay Shay. I am your host, Shannon Sharpe. I'm also the proprietor of Club Shay Shay. Stopping by for conversation and a drink today is a fan favorite, a rising star in the stand-up world who's selling out theaters and clubs around the world. You might have seen him on Kill Tony and SNL.
One of the biggest points Cam touched on, and something a lot of people seem to overlook when discussing the Kevin Hart roast, is understanding what a roast is actually supposed to be. He was completely upfront about the fact that roasts aren't really his thing. He told Shannon Sharpe that himself. According to Cam, he doesn't enjoy roasts because he's the type of person who struggles to sit back and laugh when somebody comes at him. That's simply how he's built. If someone throws a shot his way, his instinct is to fire one right back. And in a roast setting, where comedian after comedian takes turns putting you in the spotlight, that's not exactly an environment he feels comfortable in. But just because roasts aren't his personal preference doesn't mean he ignores the purpose behind them or pretends not to understand the format. He understands how the game works. He understands the tradition behind it. In fact, he pointed to the Tom Brady roast as proof that this style of comedy has always pushed boundaries and tested limits. None of this is new. It's not some sudden shift in comedy culture. Roasts have always lived in that gray area where discomfort and humor collide. But here's where his perspective gets especially interesting. Cam explained that comedians in these settings are constantly trying to find that perfect line, and sometimes they hit it dead on, while other times they step right over it. The challenge is that you often don't know which one happened until the audience reacts and the room tells you where the joke actually landed. That's an important distinction because it separates two very different debates. One debate is about the craft itself and whether the joke worked. The other is about whether the joke should have been made in the first place. And those are two completely different conversations that people keep blending together as if they're the same thing.
You like, okay, you're supposed to go, and I think somebody was telling me, like, you know, the jokes were like, ooh, that was,
Yeah.
And I guess that's the way a roast is supposed to be.
And I think it's comedy in general. Sometimes you gotta toe that line, you feel what I'm saying? You
Yeah.
gotta try to hit that line, and sometimes you go over, sometimes you hit it right on the nail of the head, you feel what I'm saying?
Right.
It just, that's comedy.
This is the part of the conversation that grabbed the most attention and sparked the biggest debates online, because Cam Patterson ultimately defended Tony Hinchcliffe, not in a loud or confrontational way, not by brushing off the criticism, but in a way that was unmistakably clear. Shannon Sharp asked him a straightforward question: what do people misunderstand about Tony Hinchcliffe? Cam's response was surprisingly simple. He said the key is actually knowing Tony as a person, not just knowing his public image, his reputation, or the headlines attached to his name. According to Cam, Tony played a major role in changing the direction of his life. He described him as a genuinely good person. But then he took the conversation a step further and made a point that was far more interesting than a basic defense. He explained that there is a major difference between the character Tony presents on stage and the person he is when the cameras are off. The version audiences see is built around controversy, pushing boundaries, and saying things most comedians would never dare to say. That's the identity the brand is built on. That's a huge part of what made Kill Tony so successful in the first place. And to be clear, Cam wasn't denying the George Floyd joke happened or trying to make excuses for it. Instead, he was making a much more nuanced argument. His point was that when people watch a stand-up set or a viral clip and immediately decide they fully understand someone's character, they're probably only seeing part of the story. What they're really seeing is a performance. They're seeing a carefully crafted version of a person designed for a specific audience and a specific purpose. The reality behind that public image can be much more complicated. Cam compared it to that one friend almost everyone knows, the person who comes across as arrogant or rude to strangers, but turns out to be incredibly loyal and genuine once you actually get to know them. Whether that comparison resonates with you or not will probably depend on your own experiences and how you viewed Tony's comedy over the years.
You gotta know the guy. I know the guy. Like, I know him for real. You feel me? That's like, he helped change my life. So I know him. I think just like the persona he give off as a person, like as his stand-up, you know, that's what he want to give. You feel me? But in reality, he's a good guy.
Really good.
You feel me?
Because, you know, some of the things, I mean, he said that, I guess he said something about Puerto Ricans once, and he said something about, I think really, especially the George Floyd situation. And I think people are like, come on now, bro. Because, and sometimes, you know, Cam, you can disguise, you know, truth disguise jokes. So how you really feel, but oh man, that's just a joke. Man, you know I'm just playing, just joking. Nah, bro, that wasn't, I ain't really like that. And I think that's what some of the people perceive him as that.
Yeah, you gotta know the guy though. It's like, you know, everybody got that friend that people might be like, man, I got an asshole, but you know him, be like, nigga.
Yeah.
This is where Cam's perspective becomes especially compelling, because despite defending Tony Hinchcliffe as a person and explaining the culture surrounding roast comedy, he never tried to act like the George Floyd joke was no big deal. In fact, he openly admitted that it landed differently for him. Not because he was trying to appeal to any specific audience, not because he was worried about public perception, but because of his own personal connection to what that moment represented. He explained that the George Floyd case affected him on a deeply personal level as a black man. His reaction wasn't rooted in politics. It wasn't about choosing sides in a larger cultural debate. It came from the simple human experience of watching a man lose his life on camera while another person's knee remained on his neck for more than 9 minutes. Cam made it clear that for him, debates about Floyd's past or the circumstances leading up to that moment didn't change the core issue. From a human standpoint, what happened was wrong. That's the place his feelings came from. And what makes his comments stand out is the way he described what happened in the room that night. He pointed out that the joke came during a lengthy roast where jokes were flying non-stop and the pace never really slowed down. Because everything was moving so quickly, he didn't have a chance to fully process his reaction before the next moment had already arrived. He said the joke put him in the red, his exact words. Not devastated, not furious, but in a very specific emotional space that the reference triggered for him. That level of honesty is something many people don't expect in conversations like this. He also raised a point that often gets overlooked whenever this controversy is discussed. Cam noted that the reaction to the George Floyd joke was dramatically different from the reaction to a Charlie Kirk joke made during the same roast. The Charlie Kirk joke didn't spark widespread outrage, demands for accountability, or public statements from various groups. And importantly, Cam wasn't making that comparison to push a political agenda. He was simply pointing out how different communities draw different lines around what they consider off-limits, and what those differences reveal about the way people respond to controversial humor.
Tell me the steps in which you get the call from Kev or Kev's people like, hey bro, we want you to be in this movie with us, and you like, this really Kevin Hart? This really Kevin Hart people? Y'all for real?
Nah, it was the thing. What happened? I got an audition for it at first. I did audition, and then I went to LA to do the audition.
Okay.
And then I was on the road. I went back on the road. I had to go to Portland the next day.
Okay.
I got a call back to go do the screen test with Kevin. So I had to leave the road for a day, go to LA, and then get to the hotel. It's real celebrities, real stars in the waiting room. You know what I'm saying? Like waiting to do the. First of all, when I get there, I'm thinking to myself, oh, these real actors.
Yeah.
This ain't for me. I ain't finna get nothing like this. You feel what I'm saying? And the funny thing is like,
Shannon Sharpe then moved the discussion towards something that had already been spreading across the internet since the roast was released. A large portion of viewers were labeling Kevin Hart as a puppet, a sellout, and someone who had been influenced or controlled through his Netflix partnership to allow material to go out that should have been stopped. Cam immediately pushed back on that narrative. Not in a defensive way, but from the standpoint of someone who has actually spent time around Kevin Hart and seen how he operates up close. He broke down what professionalism really looks like at the level Kevin Hart works at every day. He talked about being on set with Hart, watching him casually on his phone mid-conversation about unrelated topics, and then, the moment the director called action, switching instantly into full performance mode with complex monologues he clearly had fully memorized. That kind of discipline, Cam explained, is not something you associate with someone who is clueless or easily controlled like a puppet. Kevin Hart, in his view, is a workhorse who manages his environment, takes command of his process, and understands his business at a deep level. And then Cam widened the lens and made a point that goes beyond just Kevin Hart and speaks to how the internet evaluates public figures in general. He explained that the people around Kevin Hart every single day, the ones who work with him and handle business with him, are not out here calling him a sellout. They are celebrating his success and giving him his respect. The people labeling him a sellout are mostly online observers who have never met him and are reacting to short clips from a roast that stretched on for hours. That disconnect between how someone is seen online and how they are understood by the people who actually know them is a consistent theme running through Cam Patterson's entire perspective on this situation.
He gave so much like good advice, dog. But I think the best thing he did for me was just being able to watch him, like him move, like he's just I mean,
It's amazing how they turn it off and turn it on, ain't it?
not even. He a workhorse, bro.
Oh yeah, he go all the time.
Like, you meet somebody like that, and it's just like you see why he's been doing what he's doing for so long.
Success
You know
that
what I'm
he's had,
saying?
yeah.
Cause he just, I mean, he'd be on the phone talking about something at one point, and then we'll get right into the scene. Kev got like monologues,
Yeah.
long parts where he's talking, and look at it one time and go straight into it.
The Kevin Hart roast controversy isn't just about one moment or one joke. It actually reflects a much bigger tension that has been building inside comedy for years, and Cam Patterson's perspective ends up sitting right in the middle of that clash. On one side, there's the argument that comedy has always lived at the edge of what people consider acceptable, and that roasts are specifically designed to cross lines that regular conversation never could. From that point of view, trying to restrict what comedians can say based on how sensitive a topic might be is seen as a form of censorship that slowly kills the edge of the art form and replaces it with safe, predictable material that nobody really cares about. But on the other side, there's a completely different argument that says certain subjects, especially real-life events involving real people and real trauma, don't stop being meaningful just because they're turned into jokes. In that view, these aren't just edgy punchlines, they're deliberate choices, and those choices carry real emotional weight. When something like a man's death on camera becomes material in a comedy set watched by millions, the fact that it's labeled a joke doesn't erase the impact it can have on people who experienced it not as a reference, but as a painful reality. Cam doesn't fully commit to either side of this debate. Instead, he acknowledges both perspectives and gives them room to exist at the same time. He understands the structure of roast comedy and defends Tony Hinchcliffe as a person, but he also openly admits that the George Floyd joke put him in the red. What makes his take stand out is that it doesn't try to resolve the contradiction, it lives inside it. He's someone who genuinely loves comedy, built his career inside that culture, and still found himself affected by something that came out of it in a way he didn't fully expect. And that tension isn't confusion, it's just what it looks like when someone is standing in two different worlds at once.
No President Trump, they swear by it. And people that's not familiar, like, come on, man, because before he ran for politics, he was the most rapped about person.
Yeah.
That everybody tell me, I want to be like Donald Trump or the ghetto.
Yeah.
I'm Donald Trump this, I'm Donald Trump that. And then as soon as he became political,
It was like, yeah.
they look at him in a different light. So you think if people got an opportunity to know Tony,
They'll fuck with him.
okay.
I mean, it's like a thing, it's just that, bro. If you got an opportunity to know the guy, you'll
Right.
fuck with him. Because, like, I mean, it's just his brand of
This is where everything ultimately comes together. Cam Patterson walked out of that conversation having taken a position that is far more layered than most people online are willing to give credit for. He defended Tony Hinchcliffe as a person. He explained that the roast format operates in a very specific way and should be understood within its own rules. He gave Kevin Hart credit for his professionalism, discipline, and the level of control he brings to his work. And at the same time, he made it absolutely clear, without any theatrics or hesitation, that the George Floyd joke still put him in the red. None of these points cancel each other out. In fact, they describe what it actually looks like when someone is trying to process something that is creatively understandable but personally uncomfortable at the same time. Most of the public conversation around the Kevin Hart roast has split into two extreme camps. On one side are people defending every moment of it in the name of free expression in comedy, and on the other are people using it as evidence of deeper problems within entertainment culture. Cam Patterson didn't fully join either side. Instead, he essentially said he understood what he was walking into, he knows the people involved personally, he respects the structure of the format, and yet that one joke still hit him differently on a human level, and he made it clear that he is allowed to hold all of those truths at once. That kind of nuance rarely survives in online discourse because it doesn't turn into viral outrage or clean, shareable opinions, but it might be the most honest reflection of the situation so far. Now the real question is where you stand on it. Did that joke cross a line in the context of a roast, or was it simply the format doing exactly what it was designed to do? Drop your thoughts in the comments and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown.